And welcome to our Fox News Sunday Panel Plus with Britt Hume, Nina Easton, Bill Kristol, and Charles Lane. We left off the program talking about gun control. Let's go to Charles Lane, who didn't have a chance to respond. 10 bills introduced in the House of Representatives on Thursday, all of them dealing with some aspect of gun control. When you look at the language on the surface, at least, it looks like none of them would have prevented the Newtown shooting. So is what they're looking at really effective here, or is it just a political response?
Well, I must say I have very mixed feelings about this. In some sense, John, no law could prevent a Newtown. If you look at what happened in Norway a couple of years ago, where they have very, very tight controls in a very, very small country, a man still managed 75 people, 8 of which were with an explosive and the rest with guns. So if somebody's determined and crazy and evil enough to do it, it will be done. The question is there anything real we can do to make it a little bit harder at the margin? And there I do think there's a case to be made, even with all the loopholes, for limiting these high-capacity magazines. Now, why do I say that? Even though gun homicides and homicides generally have dropped in the last 20 years, what you can show an increase in the last half dozen years is mass shootings, okay? And these have been carried out with weaponry that have high-capacity magazines. And really, when you think about it, what's the civilian purpose for a magazine like that? What's the hobbyist sports interest? There might be one, but it's pretty marginal. It's not central to what gun ownership is all about. And I think with all the sort of caveats and limitations, that is a sensible measure that might help at the margins and therefore is worth doing.
When you have somebody, Nina, though, like Adam Lanza, who shot his mother, stole her legally purchased and registered firearms, took 3 of them to the school, one of which
failed to try to buy one himself.
Having failed to try to buy one himself. Stole them from his mother, took 3 guns to school, 2 handguns, and then this Bushmaster. What in any legislation, existing or proposed, could stop that?
Again, she collected assault weapons legally. If they weren't in her home legally, he would have picked up a shotgun and shot some, but he wouldn't. You had 6-year-olds. They had 3 to 11 bullet wounds per child.
It's just it's
okay.
Unbelievably
so
tragic.
And I keep saying that just because I fear that we forget this. These tragedies happen. My nephew's friend was killed at Virginia Tech, and he was there. And you see these, and then we forget about it. We talk about doing something, we forget about it. Yes, our mental health system has huge holes in it, but and yes, we should go down that road. And yes, I've never been a fan of, which started with the ACLU, by the way, this letting people, sick people determine that they can't go in. You
don't even know if Adam Lanza could have been committed.
It's true, or his mother, or people speculate his mother was trying to commit him.
It seems actually the system, what little information we have about Adam Lanza suggests the system was not failing Adam Lanza on the mental health spectrum. There have been stories written about how the fact he was the subject of special attention and special help when he was in school. The school made very good efforts to try and integrate him better. They spotted his problems. Even that explanation kind of fails in a situation like this. There is this effort to try to comprehend something like this that's so comprehensible, put it in some neat box and say, that's the fix.
So what is the fix? I talked to a sheriff, Sheriff Perry, in Oconee County, Georgia, the other day. He was in to be on Fox Business. He's got a plan. And his plan is revenue neutral. He says every school in his district has got a budget for substitute teachers. Certify his deputies as substitute teachers and hire them when they're off duty to teach a class. And then you've got an armed law enforcement officer in the school at all times.
That shows some imagination, at least. I mean, that's more novel than so much what we're hearing. The problem is we all go to battle stations immediately on the gun control measures of the kind that are being discussed now on Capitol Hill, which, contrary to Nina's description of what happens in Australia, wouldn't really do very much. That might do something.
Bill?
Look, I think tragedies do not necessarily lead to good laws. If you try to pass a law for 310 million people that's based on one terrible thing that happened that, as we've said here, might not have been affected by any of these laws. So I think we should step back and say, I'm perfectly happy, and I think the NRA, incidentally, should say, let's have a serious debate about there are current restrictions on gun ownership. There are current registration requirements. Maybe they should be extended. I think Chuck's idea and others have proposed this about the magazine size sounds reasonable to me. Presumably this has been studied, and maybe there are obstacles that we don't know about. I do think, though, that LaPierre of the NRA was much derided for his press conference, which was, I guess, from a PR point of view, thought to be a disaster and all that. But the truth is he obviously tapped into something when he said, well, wait a second, let's step back and be sensible here. We're not going to change the fact that America is a very highly gun-owning nation, and that, unfortunately, some crazy people might be able to get hold of guns, and some evil people. And would it be that terrible to make sure that each school has someone armed? I mean, either a teacher who's there who maybe had military service, who gets trained and appropriately credentialed, or someone, a sheriff's deputy who's off duty, or just a teacher who's there who's willing to go get appropriate training. I mean, I might feel better. I don't have kids anymore in elementary or high school or middle or high school, but I might feel better if I knew that there was a responsible adult with access to firearms at one of these schools. So I think LaPierre actually is a political matter. Everyone thought that was just a disaster, terrible for the NRA. I think it was fairly clever in a way. I don't approve entirely of everything he said, but as a matter of changing the discussion and saying, well, wait a second, what about this other side of the equation? He may have done some good for himself, for the cause he believes in.
There's a White House study group on gun control being led by the Vice President. We learned today that in addition to renewing the assault weapons ban and other restrictions on guns, they're also going to look at the mental health piece of this and the societal piece of this. Do you hold out any hope, Nina, that maybe they will, or Charles, that they'll look at this in a comprehensive fashion?
I hope, whether it's that study or something else, there is a serious study done about what causes mass shootings. We don't seem to know.
Because they still don't know what.
We don't know what we need to know about that.
We don't know enough about what happened in Newtown. We don't know enough about Adam Lanza. We don't know enough about any of that. And
you cannot seriously solve or address a problem until you know exactly what the problem is.
And going back to that Rasmussen poll, I think it shows how smart the American people are. Putting armed guards on some level in schools is a way to protect schools until all of these are big, complicated solutions. Even if we come to an agreement on it.
The only way that Adam Lanza could have been stopped, it would seem, is if somebody shot him when he walked in the front door.
Yeah, and I've agree that certainly some kind of interim measure, because all of these we're talking about years and years before you actually take assault weapons, for example, out of the bloodstream of society, or limit them, or limit their access by mentally ill people. I mean, these are all long-term solutions. Let's protect the kids now.
Great discussions this morning. Thanks all for joining us. Really appreciate it. Please check in with us throughout the week on FoxNewsSunday.com, and be sure to tune in next Sunday when Chris Wallace returns. Until then, have a great week.